And first of all, answer this very question. Are we right in saying that you agreed to be governed according to us in deed and not in word only? Is that true or not? How shall we answer that, Crito? Must we not agree? In Crito, Socrates is making the case that he cannot deny his death sentence. Socrates reasons that even though he had always been free to immigrate, he had chosen to remain in Athens, living under its laws, protected, nurtured, and educated, in effect, entering into a contract with the state. In this exchange with Crito, written over 2,000 years ago, Socrates, a constant resident of the city, articulates what eventually evolves into social contract theory and sets into motion what are surely the most off-sided elements and points of critique of the social contract, that of consent and obligation. Even though Socrates knew the judges were using the laws of the state to justify an unjust situation, for him to flee death would have been to renounce the contract to which he had willingly consented indeed. Socrates felt obligated to choose death, even though the terms of his choice were dictated by unjust men who perverted and appropriated just laws. In essence, the judges issued a contract of adhesion, or a take-it-or-leave-it contract that bound Socrates to his belief in justice. Why Socrates? Surely not simply because we are in Athens, dismissing and problematizing behaviors of polite visitor. Socrates helps us to revisit Patrick's point that the existence of policy presupposes potential action. Aside from 2,000 years of presupposition, there must be a prior condition for the need for action. There must be a prior condition for policy, which presupposes a prior condition to which we would rather not return. The state of nature, and hence the social contract, remain a powerful device which can be used to diagnose and examine larger issues that often remain hidden. For instance, social contract theory enables us to consider those ways political authority has been justified by music educators, as well as our disposition towards obedience and subordination. The theory can also help us consider how unwittingly we engage in policy formation as we, for instance, mindlessly generate rules in the music classroom, bow to more knowledgeable experts, fiercely protect our bit of territory, and flaunt our vainglory, isolating ourselves even further from the broader educative path. The state of nature can be both hypothetical, as a thought device, for instance, and empirical. For Hobbes, the state of nature is one in which every person is solely for themselves, fighting for funds, fighting for space, fighting for recognition, fighting for a place in the curriculum. On the other hand, others believe that the state of nature is one guided by rationality, grounded in goals for the greater good. Indeed, Gautier posits that as rational beings we are capable of acting morally without the external enforcement mechanism of the sovereign. Unfortunately, Hobbes speaks to me, and I live in a world unlike the world of Socrates, in which global capitalism and competition have become the everyday. It is our rationality. To be rational beings means to pursue contractual engagements that further global competition. Those who do not are no longer, and for the most part can no longer be, recognized as legitimate. As Michael Apple warned in 1988, freedom in a democracy is no longer defined as participating in building the common good, but as living in an unfettered commercial market, with the educational system now being seen as needing to be integrated into the mechanisms of such a market. Socrates was willing to make a contract with the state that had nurtured him and was willing to pay the price for the life he chose and was able to live. This was not a deterministic path for Socrates. He chose deliberately with agency. What lived contracts do we enter in order to teach in institutions, to have permanent job security? What do we enter when we agree indeed to curricular constraints and draconian assessment procedures? We are too often unaware of those ways we both make policy in our daily actions and our agency in policy possibilities. How then do we engage a policy rationale severed from deterministic acts that bind us to a sovereignty in which legitimate choices further reproductive agendas? I posit that in order to consider policy as framing and policy as pedagogy, we are required to consider whether we desire to consent to contract with the processes of democratic citizenry bound by communication and a commitment to broader cultural and community practices in which music education plays an integral role, or to a governing authority whose interest lay in maintaining a status quo that is based on the protection of private property, making common competition, pride, greed, envy. Rationality need not be a polite visitor, nor a logic that puts an end to conflicts and contradictions. We can enact engagements that lead toward and generate a pragmatic as well as conceptual picture for leadership in the field of music education by better understanding the influential and yet accessible to us all power of policy.